Happy March. I'd like to have a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Thank you. A motion to approve the minutes of the February 16th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 16th meeting.
Thank you, Gary.
Second.
Who's that?
Vanel.
David, okay. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Well, we received a gift which sort of changed our agenda around just before I finalized it, and that was the report. Indeed, the full new draft that Jennifer and John have done for the transportation chapter, and so with that very briefly, I'm going to introduce John Carter, who's going to lead us through a quick PowerPoint tour of that chapter. John?
Say anything first, or you want me to just go into it?
Unless you want to say anything by way of introduction.
Okay, well, I'll say a couple of things. One, we need to keep Jennifer on this. She has good ideas and is very creative, as we all know, and she has other good skills. So keep Jennifer enthused about this project, and I hope all of you are enthused about this and the direction that we can go. We're fortunate to have the comp plan was done before, and that this is, if you will, a little course correction on the comp plan. We know a lot more than we did several years ago, and so this is our chance to do something creative. We talked about doing a red line. It probably wasn't possible in the chapter. You do have the chapter as it was formally created, and so you can compare it that way, but we have a different organization with this, which is by the topics rather than the geographic areas. And as you know, I found that when you organize it by geographic areas, then you're repeating a lot of things. And when you talk about transportation, a lot of the concepts, both when we talk about facilities, but also some of the policies like transit, transportation management, and placemaking, they go across all the geographic areas. So I found it was better to organize it this way. The proof is in your look at this, but I think we have a good way to organize the transportation chapter. And another thing I might say, that this is not to be the John Carter transportation chapter. This is the community's transportation chapter. So we should look forward to making corrections. And I understand John Carter has a pretty thick skin. So well, everybody should have at it. It's fine. And I'm sure John Mooney will, if the rest of you don't. So 3 goals maybe is the organization. So you have the organization, and we'll just go through the whole thing. And I'm using this PowerPoint. It's organized by the chapters, and we'll just sort of go through the highlights of it. So the one is the organization, be satisfied that that works. Number 2 is a plan should be filled with real recommendations, not platitudes and not sort of, gee, wouldn't it be nice, but real recommendations. That's number 2. And then as nice as the recommendations are, we need to be able to implement them. So once we make a recommendation, we should make sure that we have an ability to implement it. Does Fairfax County need to be spending some money to make it done, to make it happen? Is it private sector? Is it both? What is it? But we should have our eye on both the recommendations and how to implement it. So here we go. So I guess I can't run this, Jose? Jose,
No, I'm running it.
you're running it. Okay, well, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
So here's the four sections within the transportation chapter. So we had a presentation by staff, and I took that presentation seriously and organized our facilities, at least the roads and the streets, by the classifications: expressways, minor arterials type A, minor arterials type B, collector streets, and local streets. And then we have bikeways, and we have trails and sidewalks. Next is the public transit. And I think you'll take a look at this. I think we have some interesting opportunities in Reston. We haven't talked about this a lot. Interesting things that we can do or that are about to happen in Reston. And then the transportation management program. This needs help. I think, I'm not sure we have a robust enough section on that. And then finally, the placemaking. And that's a whole new crafting of the section. By the way, there are a set of approved design guidelines that have most of the recommendations that are in the old comp plan are in the design guidelines. Those were finished after the plan. So we can take an awful lot of that detail out. Now, it has to do with lane widths and different types of streets. So I thought a better organization would be better. So the other thing about this PowerPoint, we would probably use the graphics, most of the graphics that are in this PowerPoint in the plan when we get around to doing it. So my intent is to have the graphics go with the plan. So it can be a very nicely done plan, and we don't necessarily have to rely on text to explain something. The graphics can explain something. So somebody had a question there?
Yeah, just a question of whether you want questions as you go or you want to finish and then we'll come back to them. Your choice.
Usually you wait till the end, but I think
That's
we
fine.
can, we're as free flowing as we want. As long as we can get through it, it's okay to have questions along the way, I think. So
Good.
next slide, Jose. So now here we start the classification system. You heard the presentation on this. I like these chart ideas. Maybe we don't have them quite right yet, but the nice thing about the chart is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different columns and you can see the recommendations in each column, and also you compare it with the other ones. So vertically and horizontally, I think it works, and it cuts down to the words from the words, and it makes things a little more crystal clear. So we know what the recommendations, the two not big recommendations. One is Fairfax County Parkway. I think the staff want to keep it the way it is. They had HOV lines originally. They're not doing that now. So improve the bikeways and trails along there. And then there's that one intersection, the grade separated intersection. One thing that people added to this was to try to make the through traffic work in Reston, not relying on some of our internal streets, and keep those to the outside to the extent that we can. So things like that grade separated interchange and maybe the bikeways, to the extent that they're long distance travel, would keep some of this through traffic away from the neighborhood streets in Reston. So the next slide. And this is the minor arterials. Okay, there's been a lot of discussion about the Reston Parkway. I think the DOT recommendation is to improve the parkway, particularly from South Lakes to the toll road. This is also a possibility of making this a nice linear parkway for pedestrians and bicycles, as well as working well for vehicles. So you have a picture of that one on the bottom right is the parkway as is in front of the Hyatt Regency, and the other one, well, they're both from the Hyatt Regency. That's probably a good model for it. Unfortunately, we don't have too many projects coming up, so how you implement this would have to be mostly a Fairfax County project to make it work. So the next one.
John, could I interrupt for just a second? This is David
Sure.
Bennell.
Sure, please.
Does DOT, VDOT rather, do they have an explanation for why they want to widen south of the, is it basically to support increased traffic trying to get onto the toll road?
Well, we might look at that. I don't know whether it's actually widening that whole length or whether it's a better transition between what's widened now down to South Lake. So from Sunrise Valley to South Lakes. From Sunrise Valley to the toll road, I believe that's mostly finished. So it would be from Sunrise Valley to South Lakes. And so there would have to be a transition there.
Oh, I think Mike Garcia is on here. He may know the answer to that.
Yeah. Mike, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, this is Mike. We got into it a little bit last time. We tried to explain the recommendation. What we did with the previous analysis is that there was a widening on Reston Parkway north from, I believe, about New Dominion up to Barron Cameron. And what we tried to do is we saw that there wasn't as much need to do that 6-lane section as there was more of a need to do the section between Sunrise Valley and South Lakes because there was a queuing backing up beyond South Lakes. So the reason it was added to the plan was to try to address the queuing that was happening beyond South Lakes, to bring all the queuing from South Lakes to the toll road. So yes, it was traffic meant to getting both to the north side of Reston and traffic meaning to get to the Dulles toll road. So that's the reason it was added to the plan.
I mean, I think there's a question whether reducing the queuing in the back and just packing more cars up closer to the road does any real good and whether it jeopardizes pedestrian traffic. But those are issues we can talk about later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the other minor arterial is Barron Cameron, which there's no proposal to make improvements to that. So now that type B arterials, we have Wheelie, Sunset, Sunrise, Monroe, Fox Mill, and West Ox. I didn't put all of these up, but you have West Ox at the bottom. That's in Reston, isn't it? I wasn't sure when I put this on. Mike, is that in Reston? The West Ox Road widening.
It's on the periphery of Reston. When we were kind of doing this whole analysis, we gathered all the things that were kind of in proximity and made sure they were on the plan. Now this was a recommendation before the Reston Master Plan Phase 1 was done, so it was just kind of a carryover. Should
this stay here?
Yes.
Okay. So then in Monroe Street widening and Fox Mill Road widening. I honestly is more focused on Sunrise Valley and Wheelie Avenue and Sunset Hills. I really don't like how they're turning out, just to editorialize a little bit, and we'll get into that a little bit farther, but that upper left slide is Sunrise Valley Drive, as at least one project is proposing, and the other ones are, well, they're unfortunate, I would say.
John,
Yes.
John,
if I may ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this whole presentation you're making with the slides ties directly to the detail that was sent earlier Saturday by John Mooney. That's the actual write-up.
Yeah, the text.
There's a lot of detail in the write-up.
Yes.
Because I went through it in a lot of detail yesterday and today. So these two things tie together with the graphic, pictures,
right,
so forth here, just so people know that there is other detail that you can get to.
Yeah.
And I would say there's a couple of issues on here we can talk about later that I think a couple of them are OBE, but I just wanted to mention that. Sorry to interrupt, John.
Yeah, this is organized just the same way the text is. So we'd be able to gravitate the graphics would go right in the text after we finish writing the text and making any amendments we want to the PowerPoint. Yes, John.
John Carter, and I also include our VDOT friends on this question, or rather our Fairfax County DOT friends on the question. As I was going through this in detail, I looked at the the Fairfax County Policy Transportation Appendix 1 and noted that they list Route 7 as one of the principal arterials in the Reston area because it borders at least part of the top border, and also a Lawyer's Road as a second minor arterial A. Is that accurate, Fairfax County DOT guys?
Yes, if that's in the policy section, that's accurate. It's been there for a while. If there's a need to want to kind of look at that as as part of a follow-on to this, then we could possibly do that.
And if you wanted, we could certainly add it to the chart easy enough.
Just for completeness, we might do it. It doesn't mean we have to do any action.
Yeah.
But that is another besides Fairfax, besides Reston Parkway. That is Route 7 is a principal arterial, and Lawyer's Road is another minor arterial A. So,
Are there any improvements to those, Michael, that need to be recorded here?
You can
Route 7, I assume, is underway, so there would be no improvements, but Lawyer's Road, I'm not sure of.
You can add it if you like. I don't think it's going to change anything. I think John Mooney's saying more for completeness to kind of include it.
Okay.
it tells us roads we need to be aware of, you know.
Yeah, it's fine.
Could I ask a question? And it goes back to something Gary was talking about, some more detailed write-up, and I don't know what you guys are talking about.
There's a text, the text of the whole chapter was sent, I think. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
It was sent on Saturday by John before he sent this, by John Mooney, that Jennifer and, well, John and Jennifer did it. So, Bill, you even got it from me today because I thought you'd sent your version of your comments to it, so I wasn't going to send them.
Oh, you're just referring to, okay. So all you're talking about is what John and Jennifer sent around earlier, not some.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't think that was terribly detailed, but
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, it's detailed compared to this.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
The next PowerPoint, sure. Okay. Thank you.
Next slide, Jose. So collector streets. So these are the underpasses and overpasses, Soapstone, Town Center, South Lakes, and then that Pinecrest. And so included here is the Town Center Parkway and the South Lakes Drive overpass. And there's the Pinecrest extension. Now, when we go with a bridge, our bridges in Reston need help. You can't get across them as a pedestrian or a bicyclist. So if we want to connect the two sides, the north and the south Reston, we need to have pretty wide sidewalks and bikeways, probably combined over those bridges. So, and then remember, these are going to be roads that are important to the land uses on either side. So they shouldn't be type A expressways.
Yeah, John, I mean, new things, some South Lakes and Town Center are intended to have sidewalks and bike lanes. It's the existing ones that are the problem. Is that what you meant? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Yes. Next slide, Jose. So now here we get into the detail of the street layouts. What I did was a little bit different. And so I put all of these local streets just so that you can see the entire grid that's getting created. So you've got North Town Center. This is a new grid that few have seen. Of course, you've got the existing Town Center, and those are shown in solid since they're all existing. And then you have the ones in the Boston Properties the Gateway project and the JBG project. Those were not shown the last time. So these are pretty straightforward. This is pretty much what the applicants are doing, except in the North Town Center. That's a new layout and you haven't seen it. Now, the grid of streets is fine as a concept the last time. I think we should go farther. There are some streets that are more important than others. And these are the ones like the existing Market Street in the town center. But in this slide, the Library Street, which goes all the way through North Town Center and all the way through the existing town center, and maybe on to the Boston property. That's a very important one of these local streets. And then there's one in the two in the Boston properties, one that goes north-south. You can see it as solid there, and the other one that goes east-west. One is called Visionary Way, and the other one, I forget the name, but we need to focus a lot of attention, and you'll see this coming up later in the placemaking aspect on how we're doing in creating those. I think the approved projects are doing pretty good on the gridded streets in terms of getting them built. The question is, are they going to accomplish what we really wanted? And that's what we probably want to be talking about in this transportation chapter. That's different than before. So you know, the town center has wonderful streets throughout, and we want our local streets to look more like those ones in the town center. Yes, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, the questions you were raising about areas of improvement that you think are needed, are those related to the limited connections between the new developments close to the subway and the existing town center? Because I only see one.
Not so much. There may be some of that, but it's the width of them, it's the way they're furnished, and what they accomplish. And you'll see that in the placemaking when we get down there. I'll show you some, and this will be almost comical, I think, some of them. So stay tuned for that.
Okay.
This is Burton. Could I interrupt real quick? And I'm
Sure.
curious for Gary's perspective on this too, but looking at the grid of streets that's depicted as existing in the town center,
Mm-hmm.
the grid is offset to the left from what the streets
Yeah,
actually are right now.
Yeah,
But
I see
also there's a depiction of a through connection that looks like it is meant to show a road that goes from where the fountain is in that plaza area straight to New Dominion Parkway from the fountain. There's no road there. It's just walking only. You know, if you're trying to get from that main fountain, I forget what it's called, in the town center, and you're looking north,
Look at that.
there's no drivability there. It's just a walkway.
Yeah, let me look at that. So we'll fix that. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Good catch, Gordon.
Yeah, I think it's a little off register. You can see it's not quite there.
That's just,
And
you're doing.
it's
the
off
graphic
register
drawing,
north of the town center and also in the town center. So we just need to, you can see where the gaps are, where the road should be, and it's not right. We can fix that.
John
Yeah, that's
Carter,
right. That's right. I'm talking about also there's a solid line shown.
Yes, I see
No
that.
road.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
John Carter, who proposed the proposed roads?
Those are all approved roads except in the north town center. And those roads are kind of evolving as the north town center is going. So there may be a little bit of a tussle on that. South of the access road, those are all proposed.
But what's in Northtown Center there is close, let's call it, to the last, presentation that Genova and Fairfax County have done in relation to this. Mr. Alcorn, I think, is on here.
Yeah.
And with what John has drawn there is not that far off from, what last visibility into the detail of that. And there could probably be a little bit of changes for it, but it's a reasonable depiction what John has got there.
The difference is it makes a larger park. It moves the road over it. It makes a larger park.
Yeah, Gary, that's what thanks for flagging that. Yeah, that the very center of Town Center North there is now intended to be a larger block of park. So as opposed to the smaller sort of half park that was there before, but
Right.
And actually, and just above that, John, it's shown as a blue line, but we actually have talked about that maybe being a dotted line to connect better with the field and the rec center part.
Yeah, the little east-west line there is could be paved differently.
So yeah, that's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah. But that's the primary difference between what's either built or approved and what's yet to come. It's the North Town Center piece. But yeah, we need to move this thing over and somehow got off register. That's a problem with PowerPoint and these things. Okay, let's keep going. Next slide. So again, in the upper left, that's Reston Station Boulevard. And that's turning out very poorly, I would say, what's been built to date. And you'll see more about that when we get to the placemaking again. These are our main streets in the transit station areas, and we need to focus, my perspective, we need to focus on these more. So in the bottom right is the new layout. I deleted the roads that go near the park because of topography, and it's going through some of the existing buildings, and I hated to do that. So this is if you're south of Sunset Hills Road, everything is pretty much as approved. North is slightly different, particularly in that equestrian park area. But I think this is a straightforward layout and will work well and respects the topography. And you can see there's some streams in there. Now, the south of the toll road, there's a note there. It says local street grid to be determined. There is a grid street system shown in the existing comp plan, but it basically follows the existing streets. I just didn't want to put that down like that. If someone has a better idea of how to do this, I certainly welcome this, but we don't have a good connection to the metro from the south side. And I didn't want to prejudge that Association Drive area, but if people have a good idea, then we'll take that note off and put it on. And I think Mark Looney brought up the notion that you need to put on streets that the county may be funding. If you don't put them in the plan, then it makes it harder to get them built. And I don't think the county would be building any of those streets. If that is a concern by people, maybe we can put notes on it in some different way. The other street that's changed a little bit is the connection of Reston Station Boulevard all the way over to Plaza America. It connects, but it's moved north a little bit because there's a stream in there, and I wanted to stay away from the stream in this go-round. This is not using a Sharpie and marking the maps up. This is trying to pay attention to the topography. I think it works pretty well, although there's a little bit unknown how that would actually connect to Plaza America. You have to go through some existing buildings, but maybe that's okay for this. And then I added the local street, which is existing actually, that goes through the area, connects Plaza America to Old Reston Avenue, through where the Fannie Mae building is today. So, I mean, there are changes we could make to this. I think the best thing is for people just to mark this up. If they've got some better ideas, that's okay. I do reserve the right to get smarter on these things. So, and then the street grade on Herndon Monroe, I think we've got a pretty established grid west of Monroe Street, but the county owns the area east, and I frankly wasn't sure what to make of that area in terms of the grid of streets. I know somebody commented on that at the last meeting, and they thought maybe they had some ideas. But certainly, if there's a better way, then let's do it. But again, the county controls that mostly. So
before we move on to the
Yeah.
next slide, look, my recollection is that on the lower right, where you have the local grid of streets to
Yes.
be street grid to be determined,
yeah,
my recollection is that either the owner or owners of some of those buildings there were sort of remarkably unwilling to offload Metro people there, very jealously guarding their space or their access of their employees and their customers to getting in there. Is that why the grid hasn't been determined, or is there have they relaxed that a bit?
well, I mean, first of all, we have a new owner. We now have Comstock as opposed to, I think it was Vernado before.
I think it
And
was.
there's existing parking garage and a couple buildings that are in the way of creating a grid system. And there is a move afoot to redo the Metro stations there. And I would support that. Right now, the Metro drops off on the off-ramp to get to Wheelie. That's really not acceptable. And so something different has to be done there. And I wasn't clever enough to figure out what that something else was. And I don't think the old comp plan figured that out either. So I think the old comp plan just kind of worked around the buildings, and I didn't want to just do that. You can see it in the upper right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think for the time being, working around the buildings is what you have to do, because there's no plan for at least 2 or 3 of the buildings to ever take them down. I mean, they're in good shape. They're pretty well leased. They're not going to change, but there are internal streets that already exist that could be, I believe there's going to be a right turn off of Wheelie into the east edge of that area. And you can easily run streets just following the existing internal roads without, you can improve on it if people are willing to make adjustments or come in for new buildings. But I think it makes sense to at least sketch something in just so everybody's on notice that they are going to end up providing those streets. And I do the same thing for the east side of Wheelie. And I did send something this afternoon that at least sketches out how some of those things might be connected.
Well, maybe that would work.
Can we see that, Jose? Do you have what Bill sent there?
I sent it out when I sent my markup. It was the second attachment.
No,
You should have it.
Right. I mean, Jose, there's a Jose in the building here. Jose has it.
I think you do too, Gary.
Yeah, I do too, but I meant
Okay.
for us to look at here. That's what I was talking about.
It's okay. We don't have to resolve this tonight. If
Okay.
it's a good idea, let's
Totally
just
agree.
put it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a question. So we want to work on that a little bit more. And then the county-owned property over there at Herndon Monroe, I wasn't sure about that. We could sketch in what the county has done so far, but okay, let's move on to the next one. So that takes care of the grid of streets. Now here's the bikeways. This is the graphic that was in the comp plan before. And this is out of the county's bikeway plan, and it of course has the Herndon station in it. I guess that's in an Innovation Street station, I believe is what it's called. I don't know. It's okay. I thought that we ought to emphasize some new ones. Obviously, we have the WNOD trail, and our work on that is ongoing. We want to get that connected better to Reston instead of just supporting through travel through Reston. And we already have, as projects are getting approved along there, we have several additional connections. Sunrise Valley Drive. Again, you're going to see in the placemaking that is turning out not very good, frankly, and we need to be working on that. This was an addition after the comp plan was approved the last time. The staff now wants a sidewalk separated from a bikeway, and there are designs for that coming. Nothing built quite well. There's one, the Lincoln property built it sort of. To accomplish what the staff wants to do, we need to set those buildings back farther and get more room. We might discuss this when we see the pictures. Reston Station Boulevard. Well, that has no bikeway at all on it. It has 4 moving lanes. It gets buses and cars moving around, but it's a very poor design of a street. Especially a street as important as that is. That's one of the most critical streets in the transit station area is to making that work for more than just buses. And perhaps when the other transit stations are finished at the end of this year, there may be some reduction in traffic for the Wheelie area that would allow us to retrofit that. The applicant Comstock has already proposed some significant improvements, and they are improvements. It's not widening. It's doing a lot of work to make that a very important street. Underneath that, I've listed all of these other streets that I think are critical. Market Street, which is existing. Library Street, as it goes through Northtown Center, is important. The 2 streets in the Boston properties, Inspiration Street and Visionary Way. Isaac Newton Square has one of these, and there may be some other local streets. These are the ones with the highest pedestrian volumes. These are the connections to Metro, mostly by pedestrians. So those would be on-street bike lanes. They could be a separate lane. I would imagine they would be mostly within the traffic, but they're not listed on this. They're hard to find in the graphic. Now, off-street shared use pathways. So Reston Parkway, people have talked about that. And so that needs to be decided whether it's okay the way it is in front of the existing town center, or whether you want to separate the bike from the sidewalks. Wheelie Avenue, we need to work on Wheelie Avenue. There are no bikeways there now. There are some proposed. They're mostly done by widening Wheelie Avenue on both sides to add a 5-foot lane on each side. I wouldn't do that. I think we can do better than that. And then we know about Soapstone Overpass, the Town Center Parkway, and the South Lakes Overpass. Those will have bikeways on those set apart from the roadway. And then there are a couple of shared use roadways. Old Reston Avenue, which was not listed before, and then the local streets would probably, the ones outside these high visibility local streets would probably have bikeways, probably mixed with the traffic on them. So this was an attempt, rather than listing all of the bikeways in Reston, just list the ones that are new and the ones that perhaps we want to emphasize. So people may want to look at this. You may want to add or subtract to it, but that is the thought behind this table. And then again, it's the 3-column format, so you get a lot of information quickly in a small area. So,
John
yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Let me just say at this point, I really like this tabular way that you've used
Yeah.
in the last several slides. It makes it clear and it's economical too.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for that. Secondly, when you say proposed on this table, is to whom and by whom has this proposal been, have these proposals been made?
Just to the task force.
Okay.
Some of these may have already been incorporated, like the like those overpasses and underpasses. Those are probably already there. The WNOD trail, we have been doing this as projects get approved. So we're getting more access. Sunrise Valley Drive, that's a proposal by staff since the last plan. Reston Station Boulevard is new. All of these high visibility streets are new, or at least if they're not new, it's a different emphasis. Reston Parkway, this task force has talked about this. Wheelie is a new version of this. And then Old Reston Avenue, it may not be on the plan, but it certainly is riding the horse in the right direction, if you will.
Okay.
But this is something that this is a new effort that the task force should be fostering. And if you don't like it, we'll take them off. You've got some more to add, then let's add them. But rather than go over what the staff already proposed or what's on the bikeway plan for the county, I thought we ought to separate the ones that are most important to this task force.
Okay, thank you.
John, just
Yes.
2 comments. One is, to the extent this only focuses on new things and you're assuming implementation of the rest of the earlier bike plan, we should say that, be very explicit so it isn't just forgotten. And second, where if proposed simply means we've talked about it on the task force, I think we need a new term, because most people seeing the word proposed would think that maybe it's already got some status with the county separately. And so I think that label, there needs to be some clarity distinguishing between the real proposed in the plans, in the works, versus we're thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah, that could be done. Of course, at some point, the Board of Supervisors will approve all this, so maybe there's a word for that.
I think Bill is right. Just making that very clear helps everything about the plan, even as it goes through the process. And then we have a few people here from DOT on, but it's that other people that have to see this. It's just helpful what Bill said.
Just remember, this is different than the comp plan. These are actually new bikeways that we're putting on, or a different emphasis on the existing ones. That was not in the plan before. In the plan was just the graphic to the left.
I understand that. I'm just saying, I think Bill was talking about, as we produce this and go forward, it needs to be clearer here in what we're, producing.
Yeah.
For this plan, right, Bill?
Yeah, I think you wanted a different word than proposed. And that should be easy to do. Good idea.
And I appreciate Gary's strong encouragement to me to look at the bike related language. So I have some comments.
Yes.
I agree with Gary and Bill. I think the trouble with, I like the tabular format too, but what you gain in economy, sometimes you lose in clarity. So I noticed some of the things on the graphic seem to be out of date. And what I'm talking about, what jumped out at me because I live there, is on North Shore Drive. It shows that there's a proposed bike lane to go in, and it already has gone in, but it's a little difficult to depict because it switches from bike lane to Sharrow, and it's only on one side of the road at a time. So I don't know how you could represent that clearly
And now
on
they're
the
getting
map.
rid of
But
it.
in any case, it's oh yeah, in a section, yeah. It's
They're getting rid of it now
it has been done.
to make way for the sidewalks.
Yeah, maybe the staff is gonna, this is the bikeway, the countywide bikeway plan. So maybe the staff has a new version of this. This is what was in the comp plan before. And maybe there is a new version that makes those corrections. We should obviously put
Okay.
that in instead of this.
Okay, I just figured I'd mention that. Another point, just in general, from looking at the text that I think you did a great job on with Jennifer, is the heavy use of the term bikeways is sometimes, like, I think, too unclear. And I like how you broke it out here, where it becomes clear when you're talking about a bike lane, a pathway, shared roadway. You know, a bikeway is any way that is meant for a bike to use, to be used on to go places. But it can mean a lot of different things. And so in the text, sometimes it's unclear whether we're talking about a bike lane, a cycle track, a shared use path, what. There is actually, there is no countywide bikeway plan. It was called a bicycle plan. There's a reference in the text to a bikeway plan, and there is no bikeway plan. It's called a bicycle plan.
I see. Well, help us out with this text to make it work.
Yeah, I started marking it up, and I don't have Microsoft Word, so I could send you what I have, but I don't know that my comments would get to you. But that was like a general thing that that I noted in the text, that the heavy use of bikeways sort of made everything less clear what was intended.
Certainly, if you wanted, you could just handwrite on it and send it to, scan it and send it to Jose, and we'll could do that.
On your point about Reston Station Boulevard and like that in general, I would note that if you have to choose, you know, if space is limited, then it's always preferable, I think, to have a bike lane on the side of the road that is uphill from a cyclist perspective. So on Reston Station Boulevard, that would be the side to the south, where people are, you know, maybe struggling to go uphill, and it's easy to coast downhill and maintain a speed that's roughly equivalent to the speed of traffic. And then on the shared roadway, I think the presumption should be that every roadway is shared, unless it's unless it's a restricted access road. So to list something as a shared roadway seems redundant, and it's kind of like a yellow left turn signal that's blinking when you have a green light to go ahead. You know, that's just an unnecessary categorization, I think.
Maybe we could just get rid of it.
But since Old Reston Avenue is listed there, I use that road quite a bit, and if there was interest in doing so, it seems to me that there's room to add a bike lane on the east side of Reston Station Avenue, which is the uphill side. And if that were added, I think it would help some people be more comfortable and make it easier for cars and bikes to share the road in that area.
Okay. So any other comments, or we'll move on?
Just one from me, Vanel. I'd like to have part of this conversation deal with when we're talking about shared bikeway and traffic. I'd like to have a conversation about how perhaps shared roadways, or however we're going to term this, can help in traffic calming. In other words, if on Reston Parkway or some of these other streets where you know, they want to widen the road, and maybe the bikeway and the walkways, the sidewalks are going to be off the road, but if if there is a reason that we should be looking at reducing vehicle speed, is a bike lane or bike lanes a way to do that?
David just helped me remember another point that I was wanting to make. This is Burton again. I was hoping that some of the engineers on the call might have a comment on what I saw in the text related to recommendations for having a wide outside travel lane, and whether that still makes sense in light of recent changes to Virginia law having to do with vehicles changing lanes to pass bicyclists.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead. Scott.
Scott Leary here. To Burton's direct comment, as a general rule, the wider the lane, the faster the traffic. And I apologize to the group that I have not yet had a chance to fully mark up my thoughts on this draft. I will be doing so within the next week and getting it back to Mr. Mooney, who can forward it to everyone. But also to Burton's point and David's point, all roadways are shared roadways unless they are limited access. The right of way is a public accommodation. There is no place where anybody should be forced out of the public right of way. And I have many other comments and questions, but again, I'll be marking these up and getting them back to you. So I just wanted to answer Burton's question very directly. Wider lanes, and Burton, to your question about the law, I cannot answer that, although it will necessitate presumptively a change in lane geometry.
Thanks,
Scott.
Scott. Yeah, to me, you know, biking a fair amount, I don't know that a wider lane makes me feel safer because it sort of encourages a vehicle to try to squeeze by me without changing lanes. So whereas if it's a narrower lane, then I feel more comfortable riding more in the middle of the lane. And if there's two lanes headed in the same direction, then a driver would just more naturally just change lanes and instead of trying to squeeze by.
As someone who is less old than Burton, I think to the maximum extent possible, there should be distinct bike lanes or separate shared use or bike tracks or something, because the bold few can drive down the middle and try and stay ahead of the traffic. But most of us, if you want to encourage biking, you got to give people the sense of safety, which means as far away from the cars as possible.
Bill, I definitely agree with that, but in the case where there is no bike lane, what I'm saying is it might be better to, if the choice is between two lanes going in the same direction with one of them being wide or one of them being a bike lane, I would take the bike lane. But if both the lanes are narrow, I prefer that two narrow lane situation to a narrow and a wide, because of this tendency that I seem to have observed that drivers will feel like if the lane is wide, then they'll try to squeeze by you. Whereas if it's narrow, then they'll switch lanes. But I support bike lanes.
Yeah, no, I defer to your judgment on what drivers are going, who the drivers are going to try to hit or not.
If I may, one more quick comment. While we all are fully aware of the concepts of level of service, which is fully a vehicular-based viewpoint, we, the engineers, the planners, don't yet have a fully quantified set of standards that go towards pedestrian and bicycle and other means of transportation However, the concept that is being worked towards, the standard that is currently accepted when dealing with this issue, is the level of comfort of the bicyclist. And you know, as y'all know, I've been down here in Florida for the last 10 months. The standard here is designed for Heidi, and Heidi's an 8-year-old little girl. And I just want to impress upon you that that really is the standard that's coming to. It's not about simply providing the facility. It's about designing to the comfort of the least comfortable rider.
Hey, John, I think Mike Garcia with FCDOT has a comment or
Yes, Mike.
well, I see his hand raised.
I was just going to try to add a little bit of clarification to this. I didn't want to interrupt anybody. The wide outside lane is kind of an older concept that was used kind of around 2011, 2012. It was kind of thinking that the bicyclists could share the lane with the car. That's no longer the thinking. So that's something that will have to be updated. I'd also point out that our active transportation team is looking to update the bicycle master plan and the trails plan for an active transportation plan to have it all incorporated. So any of the recommendations that you all make, we're definitely setting that on to be incorporated into the plan, and they're going to make sure the recommendations all match up. So I just kind of wanted to at least kind of set the records for all of that to be known. The one thing I wanted to clarify is that the reason for North Shore, the reason you might see a bike lane on one side and it transition to a shared arrow is that's called a climbing lane. And the lane is meant to help the bicyclists get up the hill where they can't be at a reasonable speed next to a car, or even in front of a car. So they move the bicyclists over into the lane to help them get up the hill. And then when they go downhill, then it's presumed that they can go about 25 miles per hour in keeping with the car. And so that's why they do a shared facility. So I just want to let you know that there's an actual technical term for it. And it's why you see a bike lane kind of appear and then disappear. They do use them in those kind of circumstances where it's a little tighter. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And then the other thing that they are looking for is actually we more want to design, and kind of the thinking is for ages 8 to 80. And not just an 8-year-old. We want to do for all bicyclist riders, both who have experience but still want to bike slow, and make sure it's comfortable for them. So it's called a level of traffic stress, an LTS analysis. So that's one of the terms that's being used. So I just want to say, there's a lot of thinking, a lot of reevaluation that's gone with bike facilities as well. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing what the group has to say, so that we can definitely pass that on to our team as they continue to do the active transportation plan, which they will come back, and we really invite everyone here to kind of stay engaged and stay participating in that plan.
Well, thank you, Michael. I hope you're keeping up with this and help us out on the chart as well as the text, because we want to be in sync with DOT and this the crafting of this chapter. Do you think that the master plan will keep up with the master plan for bikes will keep up with our work on the Reston comp plan?
Yes, I do. I think your work actually is going to feed into that, so it'll definitely
perfect.
happen.
Yeah. So let's keep working back and forth on this.
Just so everyone knows, on where are we? On item five, we're going to have a report from Mike and from John King on the new trails plan. Okay.
Good. Okay, the transit. So you all know plenty about Metro, and of course we've got Wheelie and soon to have Town Center and the Herndon Monroe Station. But what perhaps we don't know a lot about is the next slide. And this is new. So you see the graphic there with the red lines. So those are some of the collectors in Reston. I think we have there'll be a new bus and transit layout to get people to the transit stations as they open up. And how about some electric vehicles, electric buses, to make a really robust system? I think without spending a whole lot of money, I think we can reconfigure the busways, which is probably occurring as we speak here, and do something really pretty good. And maybe we ought to have bus shelters or little transit stations at each of the village centers and maybe some of the other critical intersections in Reston. And then, as most of you know, that there are self-driving vehicles that at least Holly Rise is creating, are using them today, that connect people in close proximity to the transit stations, to the office buildings in the way. So I think this is worth a little bit of discussion at some point on really creating, we've got Metro, or we're going to get it soon, but the other at least two layers would be the old RIBS bus and the Fairfax County circulator system, and then promoting these driverless vehicles at transit stations would be a good addition that we could provide. A little bit forward thinking perhaps, but well within what's some of it already happening. Any comments?
Be in there, and the graphics are, I mean, the pictures are very good, John.
Commissioner Carter,
Yes.
is your graphic based on what the Fairfax connector plan is?
No,
to
it's
when, okay, so that,
I'd love to have that and put it in here if there is a new plan.
there is a new plan that will be
Right.
implemented effectively. It's a turnkey operation right now for the day that the Silver Line Phase 2 opens. I served on that technical working group, which is how I know so much about that. Also, I just want to point out on your slide here, RIBS is administered by Fairfax Connector, so there's no differentiation between the two.
Between the two.
RIBS is just a route system at this point. That it's not a separate,
Good.
not a separate entity.
So you have a metro system that gets you up and down the corridor into the downtown Washington and to the whole world. The local system gets the neighborhoods better connected, and I'll bet that's a very good system that somebody's created. And then these self-driving vehicles, that's in implementation, at least at Holly Rise, and maybe we'll have it in other areas. A little more forward thinking in the plan, but not off the charts in terms of ability to accomplish this.
Fairfax County DOT guys, could you send us all the layout of the new Fairfax connector plan?
Yeah, we'll make sure to get it to you, no problem.
Thank you.
That's great. We can put it right in there. I'd love to do that. Okay, next. All right, these are hard to put graphics to it. So this is the transportation demand management. I didn't do a lot to this, the wording that's already in the plan, although the wording is oriented mostly towards the transit station areas and not all of Reston. I think it should be oriented to all of Reston. The first one, the network level of service. I don't know if we even want to talk about level of service. We might propose something else than level of service. But the plan now says level of service E is okay in the transit station and something else in the neighborhoods. That's not a lot of clarity. We might want to improve that. Next is the transportation demand management that everybody is pretty much required to do in the transit station areas. I don't know why we wouldn't have it into the neighborhoods as well, at least in existing projects. And just for my own 2 cents, I wonder if we are being a little bit too aggressive on, there's a chart in the text that you'll see that's right out of the old comp plan. We might want to take a look at that. And the problem with that is if you're overcommitting, then you're going to have a lot of violations. And we don't want to do that. So maybe another look at that. Maybe the staff DOT can take a look at that. And then we know the last one, we don't talk about this a lot, but we probably should. If you want to get the traffic down, you need to think about the mix. Do you have the right mix between residential and non-residential? And sometimes there's unacceptable impacts, and the only way out of it is reducing the density. I don't know. I know we don't like to talk about that, but I just was being a little bold, perhaps. and putting it right in the plan. So
John,
this probably needs some work.
John Carter, if I may comment quickly on those. First of all, on the level of service, as Scott mentioned, right now, level of service is the only quantifiable measure we have for the effectiveness of a transportation system, though work is being done on other measures. I would like to have, and I've already had a chance to talk with Fairfax County DOT for Fairfax County DOT and Scott and perhaps Nigel to work on a presentation to us on what are quantifiable measures of the effectiveness of our transportation system beyond merely level of service. The second thing I'll say is, I would like them to come, if it's okay with the task force, I'd like them to come next week, next meeting with a presentation on that. Secondly, I too am very concerned about what seemed to me overly optimistic traffic reduction outcomes expected in our TDM program. And thirdly, I will say that one of the reasons why we are working so hard in the full task force on population is because many of us believe that the densities are too heavy and will necessarily have a large congestion impacts. So we're going to be taking closer looks at all three of those.
Okay. I mean, we're stepping out here quite a ways on some of these recommendations, not just right here, but there's a lot of new things in this as well as in the other ones. I think the other ones are a little more straightforward, but we're stepping out here. Not that I mind, but.
Yeah, if I could just comment, I think the idea of having the staff come back with something on level of service and alternative ways of approaching it are helpful. I mean, I know for a fact, based on my own recent driving experience, you can spend a lot of time at a light when there's no traffic, just because that's the way VDOT set the signals.
Yes.
And so everything could fail if the measure of things. On TDM, my recollection is that staff has defended those numbers as viable based on experience in other places and possibly so far experience here. So maybe they should be relaxed, but I'd like to get a staff presentation on that. On the intensity and mixed use, I mean, I think one of the issues there is, I know we spent a lot of time in the last task force talking about balancing uses. We've had nothing in the way of presentations here as to what are the best balances of uses and intensity, the 50-50, 75-25, all that stuff. So unless we get useful educational presentation, I'm not sure we know how to deal with those issues.
This is Burton. I would like to chime in at this point too on the topic of metrics. And I noted when I was reading the draft text in the section on network level of service, there's talk about, in the second bullet point, there's basically talk about weighing level of service for drivers versus level of walkability, but there's no measurement of walkability that you have to compare it to. So it just says the level of walkability remains acceptable, but who determines what is acceptable, and how would we measure that?
This is Scott. I'll jump in here unless the county wants to override me. As of right now, there is no across the board measure for that. And I will also point out that when you are dealing with quote level of service, not only is that simply defined from a driver's perspective, that is defined as a driver's level of comfort and delay. So it's even though it's quantified, it's still very much a qualified perspective. Just to put that out there. But to Burton, directly to you, there is no, at this time, standardized quantification of what defines walkability.
I will point out that in my conversations with Mike and John King from Fairfax County DOT, they indicated they are in fact trying to work on other quantifiable measures of transportation system efficiency, effectiveness beyond LOS. So again, Scott, I'm going to, they've already agreed that if you agree, they're going to work with you on this presentation. Okay?
I'm more than available.
Great.
Okay, let's go to the last section. I believe that's where we are. Okay, this is meant to be both a comedy as well as a whatever the opposite is of comedy. So in the upper left is, despite the wording in the last comp plan, this is what we're getting. So this is our famous linear park along Reston Parkway. So that's what it is south of the toll road. On the right is in front of the Hyatt, probably a pretty good example of, I think, what people are thinking about. The Harrison is not quite as good. There's no curbs, and they really didn't treat between the building and the curb. And then on the lower left is Reston Parkway north of Barron Cameron. And I don't know why, but DOT doesn't like trees. There isn't a tree planted in Reston, I don't think. That's in the right of way. So we ought to fix those roads up. And if you want bikeways and sidewalks along these, how we would get this would probably have to be a capital improvement program, but we probably ought to at least think about doing better. But again, to circle around to the top, if we don't get on this, this is what it's going to look like. You see the loading docks, service lanes, street lights facing the wrong way, trees in the wrong spot, no sidewalk or trail and this is the gateway to Reston. This is their first impression to Reston. So we need to focus. This is the placemaking aspect, and it is very important to improve mobility in the Reston area. So unless there's somebody to comment, the next slide. So this is one of my favorites, Wheelie Avenue. So this probably has a wonderful level of service. So you look at the upper left, we really just need to do better. And we can't get north-south. The toll road is there, and there's a bikeway on one side, sort of. It's not well maintained. It's not wide enough. There's no bikeway on the east side, and we're putting a lot of density here, and we really need to find a way to get a connection north-south. Fortunately, there are 4 applicants along this way, and we might be able to get the applicants to do the improvements instead of the county or the state having to come back. In the upper right, that's in front of the EYA project, and that is a combined walkway and travel way for some portions of Wheelie. On the lower right is a project that I worked on in Friendship Heights. This is a combined bikeway and sidewalk. And then the lower left is the existing sidewalk along Wheelie in front of the Comstock project. But
Hey, John,
yes.
sorry, it's Lynn. I was just wondering, could you repeat what the upper right was? I didn't quite catch that.
That's a picture out of the EYA project. So this is their proposal for their frontage along EYA, which is just a portion of it. It's the area on the east side of Wheelie, north of the toll road.
Okay, thank you.
So John, that's this there. That looks like a photograph. I guess it's not, huh? It's
No, that's a proposed. Lower right and lower left are photographs. Okay, let's go on. But you see, if we let this stuff go, that's what it looks like in the upper left. Now, this is my favorite picture. This is the existing bikeway along Sunrise Valley. No trees. It's the wrong light in the wrong spot. If you're going to do those kind of lights, they should be at the intersections where people are crossing. It does a wonderful job for that electrical transformer, and it even looks like it gets the water out of this depression. But it's supposed to look like what's on the upper right. Now, this was the latest project. This is Campus Commons. And so you see the separated bikeway, and then you see the separated sidewalk, and then you see the lanes are to the left of that. This takes space. Takes at least 50 feet from the curb to the buildings. We're getting that in Campus Commons. I think we can get that in the Comstock project to the west side. If you move farther north on Sunrise Valley, this is the Halley Rise. It doesn't have the cycle track. I'm not sure why the staff didn't want that there, but it has certainly the ponds and the way the buildings are shaped makes a nice experience along Sunrise Valley. And this on the lower left is a picture from somewhere else that has the cycle track, again, just like the upper right, with the separated bikes from the sidewalks, although it takes a little bit less space. It's a lot of room to do that. Most of it looks like the upper left so far. The projects that have been implemented since the plan look like the upper left, and we need to get it to look like the upper right if that's where you want to go.
John, can I ask, when this was proposed, what were the drawings like for that? The one on the upper left?
There were no drawings that I know of. I wasn't around at the time. I don't know what it looked like, but there weren't any, nobody focused on that.
Well,
that's why we need more drawings in the plan.
Right, but how do we make sure that it gets implemented like, you know, your drawings and pictures here?
We need to get it in the drawings in the plan, and we need to get the text working, and maybe an implementation chapter that would spell these things out. Who's responsible for this?
Yeah, I guess, you know, if we're doing this, we want to make sure it turns out the way we want it to turn out. And we have to put the things, the words, drawings, you know, whatever it takes, an implementation chapter or whatever, to make sure that things turn out like this. Some of those pictures, like the one in the lower left and the one on the earlier, you know, the previous slide, are pretty good ways of doing something. They're expensive, I'm sure, but they're really excellent things that we want to see at Reston.
If I could just add, if I could piggyback on what Gary was saying, and John, I want to congratulate you and Jennifer for such a fabulous job on this. You know, I think that your depiction of these photographs in terms of prime examples of placemaking, Sunrise Valley and of course Wheelie, you know, are eye-opening to us. And I think that we need to, and this is something that I think Reston Citizens Association has been discussing on how we can ensure that the county and the builders or developers that are behind these projects are really delivering on what they have sold the community. So thank you.
we need high aspirations and we need responsibility, who's responsible for it.
Right.
And we need a review process that focuses on these things. If we don't want to do it, it ends up like on the upper left.
Exactly.
It's the same recommendation, the upper left and the upper right, same recommendation, but different implementation.
Right.
It takes a lot of work to do this. And so we need to get that focus on this. And that's why I'm presenting it this way. I want you to see what happens if you leave it alone versus what happens if you work hard.
Well,
John?
I've seen Rachel Flynn make a presentation similar to this a few times.
Yes, that's her slide there on the lower left.
Oh. So, I mean, I think we're all in sync on this. In terms of where we want to go, we just have to make sure it happens. And I've heard her say that a number of times.
Yep.
So, but the one thing on this, I caught it in the placemaking area and then tried to refer back at a comment. Should we not add to the streets here because of where the plan is to go for Town Center Parkway? That street written in conjunction with this because of, its importance in the future, not only for Reston Town Center West, but going through the extension, it's going to be a major issue here. And I would just suggest we add it as we're, focusing on some of the things to point out, like the ones we've already done in this.
To me, there are 4 of these. There's the Reston Parkway, which I guess is king, Wheelie, Sunrise Valley, Sunset Hills. We need to focus on those streets. And I think this is what we're getting on Sunrise Valley on the left. So we need to focus on that. And if you go down to the next slide, you'll see Sunset Hills, I believe.
Up in the one on the left that you were,
yes,
the upper left corner, where is that on Sunrise Valley?
It's halfway, but you can see the Reston International Center in the distance. And this is Sika. Do you know the Sika project?
The townhouses?
Yes. It's in front of that, is where it is.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But you can pick any of the projects along there. They're all terrible.
Okay.
They have different versions of terrible. But
so
I want new street lights. If we want this cycle track, I want that specified with a little more detail. And then we want the tree. We want this filled up with trees. This is if Tammy was here, she'd be talking about biophilic cities. We've got to have more trees and the streetlights. I'm actually working on that a little bit. And so anyway, enough of that.
I totally agree with you on.
And Tammy is here.
I totally agree with you, John. I totally agree with you, John, on the frontage and the need for the trees and everything else. I do think that pictures are valuable, but you got to have the words if you want it enforced as well. I mean, with as much detail as possible. I'll just say that when I first got involved in this stuff now several years ago, I did talk to the staff about how are they enforcing proffers. And the answer I got back then was, oh, well, we're working on trying to keep track of what they were and figuring out how to do that. But it was pretty clear back then that they were not doing a very good job or didn't even have very good records of what the proffers were or mechanisms to enforce. That may all have been changed, but I think that is something we should try and get assurances on, that there really are mechanisms in place to keep records and to enforce.
It's a very dramatic problem because proffers are promises from the private sector, and the public sector doesn't necessarily feel like they have to follow the proffers. That goes with the projects, not so much with the public sector in their review, and we've got to turn that around. That's why you get the upper left. And, you know, the upper left counts because that's going to be there for 100 years. The building is probably going to change a couple times in 100 years, but the streets are going to be there for a long, long time. So we really need to focus. And it starts with the staff. It goes right up to the design review board in Reston and the planning and zoning committee, right to the planning commissioners, including myself, on up to the Board of Supervisors. And I think particularly the Board of Supervisors, not that I should be editorializing too much, but they need to demand more. They should not let that upper left happen.
Okay.
Anyway,
If I could
enough
just,
of my soapbox.
if I could just do a time check here, we have a half hour left. And we do
Okay,
have
I'll move
the
quickly. We're almost.
presentation from Fairfax County DOT. So John, can you
Okay.
wrap up the presentation?
I can. Let's go to the next slide at least. So now this is Sunset Hills. So if you like, it's been a little bit changed. If you like the transformers right in the public right of way, if you love a 4-foot wide sidewalk that connects all these hordes of people that are going to get to Metro, then your slide is on the upper left. That is just insane. It should look like the upper right. And, you know, we're talking about the WNOD trail and widening that out. But Sunrise Valley will look like the upper left if we don't get working on this. So next slide. And here's one of my other favorites. Here is Reston Station Boulevard. This is supposed to be a glorious street. This is a long, long street that goes from way south in Reston all the way up to Plaza America. It needs to be much better. You notice no bikeway. You notice I couldn't get a pedestrian to pose for me in that slide. Trees are lacking, the lights are lacking. We need to work on this, and the Comstock has actually proposed some improvements to this that would be significant. It's supposed to look like the upper left. That's an internal street in the Boston Properties, the Gateway project. So you can see, well, there's different paving on the street. It's got plenty of street trees. In fact, they didn't even draw them all in that are going to be there. On the lower right, that's the plan view of that. And you see the yellow dots, those are street lights. And I think one of the things to keep note is our institutions are letting us down. The DOT, you can see the streets there have no lights. If they do, they're highlights oriented to the vehicles, not to the pedestrians. And then our folks at, I guess it's Dominion Power, don't allow trees in their right of way or in there. I don't know why. The trees must be the lines must be 60 feet high in the area and not part of this. But we need to do better. And we do have two examples in the Reston Town Center in the middle on the bottom and the lower left. Those are glorious streets. We want our streets to more look like that rather than what they do in the upper left. I presented that to the upper left to the Comstock, to Chris Clemente, who's the chair of Comstock. I said, you know, we need to improve on this. And he said to me, he said, John, who would ever do that? I said, guess what, Chris? That's your project. He said, what? By the way, since this photograph, they've lost the rest of the retail there. So that there might be a reason for that. And I don't know if there's another slide or not. I think that's the end. Yeah, that's the end.
Thank you very much, John. So I'd like to close out item number 4 with, I think, an obvious conclusion, at least on my part. I want to check it out with the rest of you. I suggest that when we begin our markup again, we use this new March draft of the comprehensive plan as our markup base. Does anyone disagree with that? Rather than the old stitched together one? Does that make sense to everybody?
Well, I didn't understand what you were saying, John. Do you want to use this outline or do you want to use the
No,
old?
I'm sorry. The version upon which your PowerPoint is based. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right.
That I spoke shorthand and confused everyone. Okay. Is everyone okay with that? That we would use John and Jennifer's March draft as the version we will mark up from now on?
Yes.
Yes.
Certainly.
I move that we do so, in fact.
And we just-
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a motion by Burton, I believe.
I'll second it.
Lynn, anybody opposed?
You got it right.
Okay. Okay.
way to go, John and
Okay.
Jennifer.
Okay, and John and Jennifer, once again, thank you so very much. So
Jo-
let's look quickly at number 5.
John,
I'm
can I
sorry.
have a quick
Go ahead.
comments? You know, we can send this back, but like Burton says, he doesn't have the software, but Jennifer is really good at all this. I think John said, you know, Burton sent it over to Jose to get back. But we just want to make sure Jennifer has any comments by anyone in a reasonable time frame, right?
Right. Right. Yes, so if you can send written comments ahead, please do so. It makes our work much easier. Let's,
I put my email address in the chat. If you want to send them to me directly, I'm happy to stitch them together and then have John send them back out to the task force if you prefer
I'll
to do it
tell
that
you,
way.
You know, Jennifer, it's fine if people just send it through the listserv. That way we'll all get the comments too. So, okay?
That's fine.
Yeah,
Yep, absolutely.
But thank you for sharing your email. So let's look at number 5. There are 2 parts to it. I sent out a little table of all the figures that were in the transportation sections of the 2013 plan. I'm not going to dwell on it because I really want to get to Fairfax County DOT, but please look at those. I've indicated the ones that I think are important and probably need to be retained in some form. Please indicate whether you want to drop any of them, add new ones, correct them, whatever, okay? Because I think graphics and figures and pictures really help understand. At this point, I would like to invite John King and Mike Garcia to give their presentation on where we stand on existing trails in Reston and proposed trails. So can you put that up, Jose?
Yeah, give me one moment.
John and Mike, are you ready?
Hi, John. This is John King. Yeah, I'm happy to speak to the maps.
Good.
So while Jose is pulling that up, and hope everyone got that over the weekend. We did a very sort of rough GIS exercise. We were thinking we got a few really good comments after the last working group meeting about the one specifically a potential missing connection, pedestrian or bicycle connection near Reston Parkway, and then another comment. I think that was Burton's comment, and then Mark Malcolm, I think, had a comment about a missing crosswalk at Sunrise Valley Drive and Fairfax County Parkway. So with that in mind, and also reflecting back on the authorization that initiated this process, there's a specific language about assessing the adequacy of existing and planned pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. Now that language is even more specific in terms of accessing Silver Line stations. I think, and I this group, and I agree with that. The approach has been to more of a one Reston approach. So we looked at what is planned and existing in terms of the pedestrian network and the trails network and the planned bicycle facilities, and also where there are spot recommendations currently. And we put those onto a few different maps. It's all the same information, just laid out differently, depending on preference for how you view it. But our request was to have you all take a look at what is planned and existing. Consider if you're aware of any other missing linkages or see where connections could be improved. That's the kind of thing we'd really like to highlight. And as we said, there's this countywide process of reviewing and updating the bicycle plan and the trails plan that's ongoing. And we think it's a very good and valuable opportunity to get your all's input and feedback on that, and highlight where, basically where we could, contribute to that effort in terms of if it's it needs to be changed, or if you have other comments about what's currently proposed, or if there are inadequate existing facilities. That's the kind of stuff we'd really like to hear about. So that was the reason we did this exercise with the mapping and sent it to you all. Hopefully it could help facilitate that work and that task. So that's the short of it. I don't know, Mike, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, just want to note the resources that go along with it.
Oh, right. So we did do put together a very a list of some other information. So the maps are sort of bare bones. We try to distill the information. There's a lot more detail in the GIS databases that the county has and other folks have in terms of exactly what type of specific recommendation there is. But anyway, the point, the maps we put together are for planning purposes only. Again, it's sort of very simple information, but if you want to take a look or have a question, if you see something that's planned, there is a lot of information available online. The bicycle master plan map, that's sort of the underlying data it's on the maps we sent out. There's also the countywide trails plan. And then other resources out there. There's the Reston Association has a trails map. I think it's very good, very well done. Really nice looking map. Reston on Foot has recommended enhancements. That's a Google map that's available. That's interactive, as well as two other interactive maps: the Trail Buddy and the Bike Fairfax map. Now that Bike Fairfax map, I think Scott Leary mentioned about comfort. That map is really about if you wanted to get on your bike today. That map sort of highlights roadways or routes that you could use to varying degrees of comfort. And then finally, just a good general reference and National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO. They have I think a very nice design guide that has information about different types of facilities. If you've not heard of a bike cycle track or a shared use or a share-o, any sort of the jargon, that I think it's a very good general reference if you have questions. So that is the accompanying resource, online resource document.
And this is Mike. I just wanted to make sure that we're looking for you all to help us kind of find the gaps with where there are facilities that you all know, Reston, you experience it every day. So if there's any gaps that are missing, both in the trails or in the bicycle facilities, let us know. If there's any gaps in like the sidewalk network, you can let us know that too. That's good enough because we'll pass that on as well to the active transportation team. But that's it. Whenever development or anything does come in, there is requirements to build sidewalks. So there's not always a requirement to kind of construct the bike facilities unless they're kind of shown on the comprehensive plan. So that's really where we want to make sure that we have this input and from you all.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, John. And I apologize that I mischaracterized their map. It's obviously, as they said, a map not only of trails, but also bikeways. So thank you guys very much. We don't have a whole lot of time left. So let's skip trying to do any markup. So item 6, we'll start that next week. A quick assessment of our work plan schedule. So our next meeting is scheduled for March the 16th, and the one after that for March the 30th. And our goal is to deliver to the full task force by April the 2nd, a draft to the full task force, a draft of our transportation chapter for discussion at the, are we still April the 5th for the full task force? Jose, do you know?
What was that, John?
Is it April the 5th? Is that the first April meeting for the task force?
I want to say it's April 12th. They usually meet the 2nd and 4th Monday.
Okay.
The whole task force does.
Okay, but anyway, one of the April meetings. So that's our goal. After what Jennifer and John have done, I have hopes that we will have a draft suitable for discussion by the full task force. So they have to approve it. They have to give their feedback. So I think we're on schedule. Are people comfortable with our work load ahead? It's always been ambitious, but I think we're on a good path.
Sounds good.
Looks good to me, John.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about then number 8, our agenda for the next meeting. I think we need to continue a markup of the draft. Let's call it the March draft now that John and Jennifer have done. We need to make some decisions about figures that we want to include. So that's what I would like us to do at our next meeting on February 16th. And moving to number 9, action assignments before the next meeting. Again, if everyone would review the figures, the list of figures in the spreadsheet I sent you, and I gave a live link, a hot link to the current version of the comprehensive plan online so that you can actually see the figures. And then the second thing to review is Fairfax County DOT's maps of trails and bikeways to see if there is anything missing or wrong. Secondly, we will continue to review the March draft so that and prepare your comments ahead of time so that we can move efficiently through the markup. And then the third big topic, I'd like to convene a meeting with Scott and John King and Mike Garcia to talk about quantitative measures, or at least measures whenever possible quantitative, of the effectiveness of our transportation system measures in addition to LOS. Do those assignments make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
They do. I think it would be helpful, at least for me, to have that written and sent out in an email ahead of distribution of the minutes from tonight's meeting.
Okay. You have them all in the agenda, except for I elaborated a bit more on A and I didn't have C, but they are in 9 of the agenda, but I will send it out again, okay?
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Everybody's doing great work on this. Is there any additional business for tonight?
John, move the adjourn for tonight.
I second.
Okay, is there anybody foolish enough to disagree? We are adjourned. Thank you all. And special thanks
To John and Jennifer too.
Jennifer and John Carter. Great work, you guys.
Jennifer.
Bye, John and Jennifer.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for everybody for